Bobbie's currently the ABA consultant at Park House School. Her passion for ABA grew, and she started a master's in 2015. Bobbie relocated to Surrey to join a school specialised in the use of behaviour analysis as she wanted to gain experience. She's joined our school as a tutor, was promoted to lead teacher, and I'm managing a class of children aged 4 to 9 years old, all the way through to her current role as consultant. And Bobbie's session is titled Independence is Everyone's Right. And on that, I'll hand over to Bobbie now and to take us through what that means in this context. Over to you, Bobbie.
Thank you, Andy. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So yeah, my discussion today is on independence is everyone's right, and I'm very pleased to be discussing how we emphasise this at Park House School and within BeyondAutism, and the steps that we've taken towards promoting this. We have developed a framework which I will talk about in a little bit more detail as we go through. But when asked to attend this conference and discuss independence, I began by asking myself, what does independence mean? So towards the end of this conference and after multiple discussions, I thought I would also bring the conversation to the audience at home. So if you could just put any phrases or words in the chat box outlining what independence means to you personally, it'd be quite good to get some perspective on that. So we have the right to voice my wishes, choice, having your own identity, and the choice. Thank you, everybody. Being able to do what I want to do. Making mistakes, that's a good one, and learning from them and being able to decide about my life. So yeah, keep them coming. It's very interesting to see different perspectives. The first one I've got up here is autonomy, which we have heard a lot about and has been emphasised from Sandy Toogood this morning and a range of conversations. I've also added some additional words which have come up in your discussions here, but also in research, but asking people generally. So we have terms such as freedom of choice, being self-sufficient, being able to make your own decisions, which came up a lot in our chat now, living a fulfilling and sustainable life, and the ability to say no was also a phrase that I liked. It's interesting, obviously we have a general theme and an understanding of what independence is, but I think on a personal, it's very much on a personal level of how you express your independence. And it can obviously be influenced by our life experiences, also by our professional experiences. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of put forward that what we mean by independence is a range of behaviours, a range of attitudes and perspectives. It's not just the term independence. So because as behaviour analysts, we do use the term independence very frequently. We use it just in terms of independent responding. I don't know, I'm sure there's many people in this conference that have written targets which will say will respond 90% independently. And an example is Ahmed will play with a toy set for 2 minutes independently. But in this instance, what does independence actually mean? Are we defining it? Is Ahmed going to the play area, selecting the toy by himself and then engaging with the activity? Or is he being provided with all of the materials and being supported by an adult seated nearby? So the level of independence looks very different depending on what you are looking for. And I just think it does need to be defined. So when choosing skills to work on, we need to have an idea of what level of independence we're looking at. and also being aware of whether we're standardizing it for everybody. This term has come up a lot, just enough support, and I know David's talk has just covered this as well. But in terms of our cohort of individuals with autism and the field of ABA, independence is often defined as the ability to do something on his or her own. And strategies to increase independence are everywhere. We're all trained in an ABA school. All of our tutors are trained in reinforcement. We have chains available. We have prompting procedures, all of which are evidence-based, and we're looking for increasing independence with a skill. But should we be considering a little bit more about the support that an actual child needs, rather than working towards this idea of independence, that they should be able to do things on their own? A study was, a conversation was discussed in 2015 with somebody called Northway, who had a conversation with a group of individuals with intellectual disabilities and asked the same question to them: what does independence mean to you? And one of the members of that group stated that independence for them was doing what I want, when I want, with the right support. So we have the same desires there, like being able to make choices, being able to make choices when something happens, but they were able to acknowledge that they needed the right support. And I don't think, we also as professionals and behaviour analysts need to be aware of what that right support is. I'm aware that this particular group of individuals were able to express themselves vocally and answer that question. So we do need to look at ways in which we're supporting individuals who aren't able to express their actual needs, and also definitely wouldn't be able to provide the level of support that they require. I also do want us to consider whether we are reducing support too quickly, or are we adding it unnecessarily? So there does need to be consideration around that. So in Northway's paper, she did also reference a author called Jenny Morris, who wrote a book called Independent Lives, Community Care and Disabled People. And in the book, Morris raised the concern of, so the question of whether independence is actually related to autonomy and exerting control, which is what multiple discussions have covered at this conference. And should we be allowing individuals to exert some control over the support that is provided? So living a fully independent life does not mean less support, and it shouldn't be that way. They should be able to ask for support if needed. We should be making sure that the right procedures are in place for them to live as independent as possible. Maybe not fully independent from the basis use of the word, but as independent as possible. Another concern raised in this book is striving for independence in terms of whether someone could do something on their own could lead to support being withdrawn too quickly. It means that like care providers may not implement the right strategies because they're saying, oh, they can do that on their own, whereas actually they do need some level of support, but it's just not aware of how much support they actually need. And obviously, services should be flexible. The amount of support that a person requires will vary in context, will vary even on different days. So we should be factoring that in as well. We should have some flexibility. I don't think we necessarily should be striving for leaving them a person to do things on their own. I've also expressed here, what about interdependence? So how many of us rely on our family members, our co-workers, our friends on a day-to-day basis sometimes to even do simple tasks? You may want help, for instance, getting pasta out the cupboard while you're cooking. You may ask for help with that. You may need a reminder to read a measurement on a menu and what it's actually referring to. So there are times we all need a certain level of support on a day-to-day basis. So I don't think we should be completely striving for pure being able to do things on our own. And then by considering the right support, by ensuring that we are understanding particularly what is needed in the environment for a person to successfully achieve what they want, when they want, then we need to make sure that that can be factored into other areas of their life. So we are a school, and I'll be talking a little bit more about what we do as a school, but we want to make sure that what we do here can be transferable to home, to the community, to make sure that they are able to continue to express themselves in various settings and have success and lead lives that they want to live. So independence does come with the right to make choices. We've all said we would like to, as part of independence, we want to be able to exert our control over our lives and be able to express when we want to do things. If we don't want to do things, it's all very important. It's very nice to have this kind of conversation. We had 2 days of a discussion around how we can promote this even more for autistic people, and I think it's so important. But these conversations have been around for a long time. I know Sandy Toogood referenced Bannerman this morning. I think that is still an important paper. He discusses this context in great detail. And habilitation, so obviously the paper is about balancing the right to habilitation with the right to personal liberties. So habilitation in this context is referring to teaching of skills needed to live as independently as possible. So you've got your personal liberties, making choices, but also being able to develop skills so you can live as independent as possible. And the way that Bannerman discussed this, they did express that there are advantages and disadvantages to both. We can provide a system of coercion and forcing people to make decisions they don't necessarily want to do, or maybe not even have a decision about that. They're just made to live through those routines. Whereas on the other hand, we've got individuals who may be expressing their personal liberties all the time, in which case could lead to harmful, unsafe, unhealthy behaviours, which might not be in the best interest of them. So there does need to be that balance, and there are advantages and disadvantages of both. And service providers should be creating appropriate learning opportunities for individuals with autism to build those skills, to make choices, make the right, healthy choices for them, choices that are in their best interests, that do allow them to live a free life, that are expressing all of those interests that David Anthony's just discussed in terms of the personal plan, like being able to express all of that. We as service providers need to be able to give them options and be able to do that. And just in general, simple choices should be valued. Although the cohort of children we work with have autism, they should be able to make simple choices about when they want to go for a walk, what clothes they want to wear, what they want to eat at that moment, obviously within reason, and that it's not too harmful. But yeah, there should be that balance for sure. I've mentioned balance a lot. I'm aware that as I'm talking about independence and having the right to make choices is a future goal that a lot of adults can express more. We are Park House School is a school for children aged 4 to 11 years old, so they are still children. All children are expected to attend school and access education, and parents and caregivers have the right to make decisions for their child. They're going to express they're going to want to make the right choices to keep them happy, keep them safe, and that's completely understandable, and I'm not disregarding any of that. And there does need to be that balance. So within Park House, we are creating a learning environment to teach important skills. So we teach a range of skills from accessing the national curriculum, so literacy, numeracy. We work on functional living skills, how to brush your teeth, for instance, how to make a sandwich. But why also can't we teach how to make choices, how to express yourself, how to explore your own interests, explore your own desires, what's meaningful to you? Why can't we teach our pupils how to do that in a well-balanced way, as well as teaching them that you will sometimes have to transition to things that you don't necessarily want to do, that you can't always have everything. There are times you can be denied access, another pupil might be playing with something. So we can create that learning environment in which you're developing skills to learn when things are available, when I can make choices, what's safe for me, what's not safe. So we can start on those very, very early skills. I'll be talking about the framework we've developed and how those skills are taught at this level from like 4 to 11 years old. And that balance between what you are able to express and what sometimes you may have to follow. We at an ABA school identify that learning is very different for each individual, but we should always be focusing on how that individual can get their voice heard through various communication methods or through their behaviours. And we're always identifying how a child learns best. Once we know all of that information, we can help develop the skills necessary. So at Park House School, the pupils' daily timetable is completely individualised. It's a mix of adult-led activities, then they may be given a choice of activities they want to do. And it's a mix of structured settings, which I will go through in terms of the independence framework. So with that context kind of in mind, so developing a certain level of independence and autonomy with the right support, we, a team at BeyondAutism, looked at developing a framework to identify the levels of support that an individual may need while within our setting. So as standard, BeyondAutism provides one-to-one support for everybody, for each pupil, sometimes 2-to-1 if needed, if there are particular barriers. We're aware that one-to-one has its advantages. We can create very specific learning opportunities, lots of practice opportunities, a bit more intensity, get to know the child very, very well, can fine-tune the environment a little bit more when you've got that one-to-one. So we're very aware that one-to-one support is completely necessary for a lot of our pupils and is advantageous. But on the other hand, are we preparing all our pupils for other eventualities outside of school? So are we setting up the environment to make sure that they can get their voices heard in a situation where you don't always have an adult by your side, or when the environment changes slightly? Are we preparing those problem-solving skills? Are we the attention-seeking skills? All of that we've started to factor in. We're aware that at home, families can't always provide the one-to-one that we do at school. So obviously we can teach skills, but the main focus is that we want to be able to generalize them to other settings and especially to home. We want to make sure they're effective. So just because a child may have learned a skill in school, we want to make sure it's ready to be transferred to home. So with one-to-one, is that realistic for them, for the individual developing through life and being able to access their environment? So within BeyondAutism, we have used a range of assessment tools, and this has helped guide our framework. and we've used specific tools. So we, over time, we've used the Verbal Behaviour Milestones Assessment Placement Programs, the VB-MAP, the EFL, which is what Sarah discussed in detail early on, the ABLES, AFLS curriculum, and the Good Learner repertoires. So AFLS is used a lot more at Tram House with our older cohort, because it's obviously a lot more around access and community and general living skills, navigating relationships, that kind of thing. And the Good Learner repertoire we've just recently started to introduce to look at accessing group lessons and school readiness procedures. They obviously all have their advantages and disadvantages, and we still use them all to reference certain skills for each of our pupils. But the main two in terms of developing our framework that were utilised was the VB-MAP and EFL. So VB-MAP provides the verbal behaviour milestones, so the communication levels that may be required, and then like classroom routines, and then also in there is a bit of numeracy and literacy. So those skills are included, as well as EFL goals, which is your tolerance skills, reducing any barriers, teaching a very, very important listener repertoire skills that are important to keeping safe. All of those are included in our development of the independence framework as well. So the independence framework is the framework we've developed at BeyondAutism, and it was constructed in 2019. We had two members of Park House, Karen Tolty and Rich, trawled through the EFL and VB-MAP and looked at all of the skills and determined against these levels where the skill would apply to. So they developed seven, including the barriers, level areas. And as you develop through the leveling system, the idea is that the level of support reduces as you develop those skills. So I'll be going into a little bit more detail about what is at each level. But at the first level, we always look at barriers. So we refer to that for all of our pupils. And then we have level 1 prerequisites, level 2 being with others, level 3 group participation, level 4 generalizing mastered, level 5 learning new skills, and then level 6 transitioning. On this slide, it kind of breaks it down a little bit more. So on the top is your level system from 0 to 6. And then it's broken down into the percentages of and time periods that a child would be in certain structured settings, so either group or one-to-one. So if you are identifying no skills from 1 to 6, so if a child wasn't displaying any prerequisite skills, and that may be due to significant barriers such as even accessing the education setting, or significant behaviours that challenge that means that we weren't able to assess on the higher levels, then that child would have one-to-one support throughout the whole day, most likely including snack and lunch times as well. So it means that the majority of the day, 4.5 hours, is within one-to-one settings. And then the prerequisite stage is level 1, which a significant amount of our pupils are at this stage, which is why we're saying one-to-one is still suitable. So they would have one-to-one for 80 to 100% of their day, depending on the need. But they would also have access to what we call pre-groups and then exploration groups. So pre-groups are led by the early careers teachers or the qualified teachers. And they are an opportunity for a group of 2 to 4 pupils to be seated together and respond to one teacher, and the one-to-one tutor is seated either behind them or within the room, readily available. And within these sessions, they're learning group rules, they're learning to attend to stimuli, they're learning to attend to one person. a range of activities, a lot of fun in the beginning, to kind of pair up those sessions. Yeah, and then they may also access structured in-class sessions such as art, food tech, PE. They will always access those with one-to-one support. So they're starting to build the pre-group access, but they would still require one-to-one support. And then as you progress, the structure of the day varies. So they would, from level 2 onwards, they'll be accessing more academic-based groups by an early careers teacher or qualified teacher. So they're accessing English, maths, science, PSHE, and they would have a little bit more level of independence. So the tutors can fade back a lot more. Sometimes the tutors just make sure they've transitioned there and then they step out. So they'd have 2 adults in the room with the 1 teacher for maybe 4 children. So you're looking at 1-to-2 staffing ratio. And yeah, basically as you progress, the fewer adults there are available, the complexity of the group increases. But yeah, that's a basic structure based on the levels of the independence framework. So just to go into a little bit more detail about what the different leveling systems, how they look. I didn't include some screenshots of the independence framework, but I should have. But basically, it's an Excel document that has all of the skills from VBMAP or EFL in the relevant sections. And it's a hierarchy system, so a child would build skills from the bottom and work their way up. And each skill is then broken down into kind of mastery criteria. For instance, so taking a desired item from an adult, so an adult walks towards a child with a toy that they want, and whether they take it is taken data. So they may do this, takes an item 1 time, and then you're looking towards taking it 3 times. So the frequency increases over time, and the level of prompting decreases. So yeah, each skill is broken down into further smaller skills. So at level 0 is our barriers. So this is reducing any barriers to learning. We want to make sure that a child is able to tolerate changes in routines. So can they, this is where I was saying with the balance, there will be times where things do have to change, just in everyday life and in school as well. Will they tolerate demonstration prompt? Because in order to learn, in order to access your environment, you may need to be supported. Can they tolerate the word no, or also delivery of praise? We also look at particular repertoires such as manding, social, tacting and imitation to check that they have those skills, and we work on building those up to a level in which they can access their environment. Learning here is supported by a behaviour plan. So each pupil will have an individualised behaviour plan, in which case we implement function-based strategies. And also at this stage is where we would introduce AAC trials where necessary. So if we're wanting to identify what the right communication method is, obviously that's very, very important to any of this, to any level of independence and making choices as the communication system. So there may be a range of AACs trialed alongside speech and language support at this stage. So a pupil may have skills on levels 1 to 6, but there may also be significant barriers that we'd want to be working to reduce. Sorry, bear with me. Okay, so level 1 is our prerequisite stage. This is developing skills and interests. This area is important for a child to begin to explore different items. This is where we would do a lot of pairing, a lot of stimulus pairing, exposing the children to lots of different activities, just for them to explore their interests. Within this section, we may look at things like attending to stimuli. So it's also prerequisites to learning, making learning fun, making adult engagement, like interaction with us, fun and engaging, so they want to learn. Pointing and gesturing to items is obviously an important prerequisite to communication, and then we may look at manding in this stage once we've developed an AAC. Saying yes or no. So very early on, we try and teach either nodding or signing or saying yes or even no, which I think is very important at a very early stage to say they don't want something. Imitation skills, playing with toy sets. We want to make sure they've got a range of activities to enrich their day. Making transitions, that is important, and then also responding to no, stop. So all of those EFL goals that are important to keep them safe, to make sure they can access the community, to make sure they are being safe, basically. And then requesting for removal of items is a goal towards the top of the hierarchy of level 1. To say I'm finished, I want to go have a break, that kind of thing should be we should be working on that quite early on. So level 2 begins. So we worked on the prerequisites to learning. We're getting that interaction with one-to-one. We're building skills. They're starting to communicate, and then we want to start building the tolerance of other people. So we want to make sure that the children can tolerate peers in close proximity. They're also engaging in independent play, so they're fulfilling their own time. We've developed the choice element, the interest in level 1, and we're pursuing that to level 2 to make sure that they can independently play. They can engage when an adult's not nearby, for instance. But this is where the kind of discussion around independent comes from. We need to make sure that we're defining for that child what independent play looks like, and we're speaking to parents and families at home and say he can do puzzle, you just need to get it out for him, but then he'll be able to play by himself. So just having those discussions. Starting to attend groups of 2 to 4 peers, and within level 2 we want to start to see a little bit more language, such as labelling and more advanced imitation skills, so they can learn from their peers and not just necessarily adults. So level 3 moves towards group participation. So this is where the staffing levels are reduced even more for a percentage of their day. Within this level, pupils may be able to have more expanded listener skills, so they can identify things by feature function class, they can identify adjectives. An important skill is to request for their own AAC. So where they ask, like, have they got a generic sign that gets their textbook back or their iPad, or they're able to identify and locate it themselves. Completing work independently, so maybe that's worksheets in group lessons. Locating rooms or people within the school, so they're making transitions by themselves now. So locating rooms or peoples in the school. When asked to, okay, it's time for English group, we want them to start walking by themselves. Completing chore types activities appears at this level, sorting laundry, preparing meals, that kind of thing, and manding for breaks whilst doing work activities to make sure they're regulating themselves and make sure that the tutors can support them, so they're able to identify that they need a break right now. Level 4 is looking at generalizing mastered, so all those skills learnt in kind of the one-to-one settings in that percentage of the time, we want to make sure they can now apply to a range of different functional activities. They're answering time-based questions, so they can start to access the schedule. They understand what the schedule means, they can transition themselves. They begin to respond to interverbals and engage in some early communication and conversation skills. And we're looking at manding for information, so that they can ask things like, when are we finished? Where are we going next? All those kind of important skills, or where's my favourite toy, for instance. Level 5 is learning new skills. So now they should be learning from group context as well as one-to-one, but much more so in group context. They should be able to work up to 20 minutes. We will be teaching them to recall events, follow directions from peers, play social games, again, without the adult present. We're just trying to shift the support from those around them, rather than just that one-to-one adult all the time that they're used to listening to. Can they listen to other people and enjoy time with other people? Using adjectives, pronouns and prepositions may be developed here as well. And then for level 6, this is where we may see some of our learners hopefully showing the skills that they could go to a less intensive setting. So as I've said, we are one-to-one, so we want to make sure that we reduce that where we can, but maybe there are other settings that they would benefit from, or equally respite services, or later on work experience activities that they could engage in. So by this stage, we'd want to teach our pupils to work continuously for 1 hour, show some improvisation skills. So what about when things are missing? What can you do? What could you say? Who could you ask for help? Starting to label emotions in self and others, identifying that there needs to be a change in the environment. So saying things like, it's too bright, I need, can we turn the light off? It's too cold, for instance. Negotiating time with a reinforcer is a skill is actually on the independence framework. So saying things, can I have 5 more minutes? I'm not ready to come out yet, that kind of thing. And demanding for approval or feedback, so checking that they're doing things right. That this is where the support level comes in. They're starting to identify that I've had a go at this by myself, but I just need to check that it's okay. And demanding for support or access to activities for comfort following aversive events. So getting their needs met from other people where possible, or asking for some time with preferred activities. So within Park House, this framework has rolled out since 2019. It is now applied to the baseline assessment period, and skills are taken from this termly as part of IEPs. And individual timetables are in place, as I've mentioned. So it may be that there's a cooking activity scheduled, in which case we would work on some of these skills, like manding, tacting, within that setting. We do have one class within Park House School which is designed to be less intensive, designed to fade out that one-to-one. So all of the pupils who are in that class are demonstrating skills at level 3 onwards, and the staffing ratio on a day-to-day basis is 5 staff to 8 pupils. So they have very structured groups designed by the early careers teacher, and the majority of the pupils have had paired learning. So they would be with another pupil throughout the whole day with one tutor. So they do similar activities, or they may do things like independent learning. So some of the pupils access Hedge Sprout, for instance, and would be engaging with that, while the other pupil has a bit more one-to-one input. But yeah, it's very needs basis. There is a little bit of data on how we've applied it. So I've compared 2 pupils who are exactly in the same year group, but dependent on the skills that they demonstrate across the independence framework, that is reflective of the support that they require in school. So pupil A, for instance, is the yellow bars, and the line at the bottom is the scoring on the levels of the independence framework. So this pupil has scores quite low on the barriers. So a low score means there's more significant barriers, and a high score means that they can do a lot of tolerance and their repertoires are growing consistently. So a high score indicates there's not many barriers. They are demonstrating majority of skills at level 1. So that's the prerequisite level. They require consistent one-to-one support for teaching, so all of their skills are taught in one-to-one setting. This is reduced at break time, so it's 1 to 2 at break times, as they do enjoy eating, and that's a good time for them to kind of express their time by themselves. And this pupil attends what we call exploration groups. So in this group, it's like pre-group, but it's the next step where they do start to bring some of the national curriculum in, such as looking at colours, talking about colours, and just exposing to number games, number activities, so that they are having fun group lessons. Pupil B as you can see, scores a lot more highly on level 3. And he actually accesses our less structured group, our less structured classroom. So his school day is completely paired. He's always with another learner, and he attends structured groups, as I've mentioned, and he doesn't require much input one-to-one support. He may, for certain skills, to be developed initially, but then they're quickly generalized to group settings. So the percentage of one-to-one is very low for him. And this is the progress for one pupil in particular. So this learner joined us in autumn 2019 when this was actually rolled out. So at this baseline stage, the learner was displaying significant barriers. So this is particularly just for level 1. So this is his progress through level 1. So initially at baseline, we weren't able to assess his skills. There were too many barriers to transitions. He wouldn't transition through the setting, through the school, sorry. So we had to stay in a preferred location and basically just identify his needs at this stage. And it was hard to assess a different any of the skills. So then his IEP went in, the behaviour plan went in to support him to access the learning environment, and we identified that he loved the iPad. He did absolutely love Messy Play, so we were able to assess his interests, build up that pairing process, and build up the time at school to make it more successful and positive, and actually then access some learning. So he was developing skills at the prerequisite level. So there was a year gap between autumn 19 and autumn 20 by the time that it was reviewed, due to obviously the pandemic, but it's then reviewed on a termly basis. So by spring 21, he was developing many more prerequisite skills, and summer 21, he's gone from showing us 0 skills to over 60. So in terms of his group progression as well, so around spring 21 is when he was accessing one-to-one, but also occasional pre-group. So once a week he would attend pre-group lessons with the qualified teacher. And then by summer 21, as he's developing more independent skills, he started to attend our exploration groups. I don't have data for this academic year in terms of this graph, but now this particular pupil is now accessing our academic groups as well. So he's made fantastic progress from the barriers level to now attending academic groups and requiring less and less support. So in terms of the groups, their day is still timetable to be one-to-one, apart from that one class who have about 3 or 4 groups a day. But in general, these pupils would have 2 groups a day for 3 times a week. So it's in terms of academic groups, but in terms of in-class groups, they may have food tech, arts, so those will be scheduled at least once a day. So there is an opportunity at least once a day to practice group skills and for the tutors to fade out. But yeah, it was just a tool to identify what skills might be needed for support to be faded out and where that support is needed. So just some considerations. So it is a best fit model. We still use other assessment tools. The independent framework doesn't cover everything that we may want to teach a child, and that is important and valued for them and for parents. It is still a work in progress. We're constantly reviewing it, checking that the skills do align with the levels that the pupils are showing. We do need more data to support the use of the level system. Like, is it correct for the staffing levels? Is it successful? And then we may need to fine tune when and where support is required. So we've got the level system, we've got in terms of, okay, now they can access this group, but do we need to fine tune it even more? So for instance, this child does need one-to-one for academic groups, but they'll be okay during PE, for instance, with 1 to 3. And the aim was more to change the mindset of people supporting our pupils in education. We may not want to provide one-to-one as standard. Going forward then, so I believe that ABA practice should still be open to adapting. We always should strive to promote pupil voice and understand what is in the best interest for the individual. In terms of whose decision is it anyway, we've all got our own opinions on what independence looks like, but how do we ensure that autistic individuals are being allowed that level of independence and autonomy also, and how do we make sure that we can promote that? We still need to understand, what independence actually means. We must continue to pursue and develop independence, being mindful of providing the right support. So that's everything that I wanted to cover. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobbie. As with all of these things that we've covered over the course of the conference, is obviously only scratching the surface of all the information and dedication it takes to get to this point. There was a couple of questions. Maria and Jane were both reflecting on how teaching independence is crucial. Teaching them to have choices is obviously one of the things that we pride ourselves on within our services, and I think it's been broadly reflected as a positive thing within our whole conference. But then also just to talk about what's been mentioned by yourself and also by Sandy and others about where you kind of draw the line between 100% free reign choice and then the right to eat donuts, the Bannerman paper, versus teaching how to make choices and then dealing with the feedback. I mean, is that something that you I know you mentioned it. Is that a conversation you had many times, or was it inferred?
No, I think it's still an ongoing conversation as well. So even we have, obviously, there may be behaviours that challenge that are evoked by certain situations, and then there's that conversation of like, right now, are we listening to this behaviour and just allow it, like not allowing, but like listening to behaviour, they're making this choice. Let's just go with this choice, and later we can deal with what the setting event was and how we can make that more successful next time. So there's in that context as well, but equally, I tried to say that we are a school. There are going to be rules, there are going to be regulations, and there are in life rules and regulations. But it's about getting to, if you can make the transition successful, say getting to the working environment, it's about then just little choices within that. So, okay, now we're going to do table work. Do you want to do your maths target? Do you want to do your English target? So there's still that choice, there's still that element of choice to make it a bit more successfis There's always a choice of like, what do you want to work for? That's always expressed as well. But it is hard. It is a conversation that still needs to be had. I think there are situations where it can be too much of an adult-driven situation, which is why we do potentially see more behaviours that challenge, because there isn't that opportunity to express themselves. But equally, if it was a day that a child chose their whole day, then I'm sure they would spend the whole day in soft play, or they would spend the whole day sometimes on the iPad, or may not make.
But I suppose it's not vastly different between the time that you would spend getting to know a child and building rapport and everything else, like that, ensuring that choice as part of that would then go towards the phrase I think Sandy used earlier, which is around the trust bank.
Yes.
So knowing that it will be available later, or there's an element of, well, I can do this now and have that other thing afterwards is part of the dynamic. Sarah wondered how long it took to run the assessment.
It depends. Yeah, it depends on the learner and the skills they're developing. Because our baseline is 6 to 8 weeks, and it can take that full 6 weeks. But that's dipping in and out. So it's and obviously would depend on the skills that they do. What we do. So each level has grey areas. So very key skills that we want to see before we move to the next level, and then each grey area is then broken down even further to many more skills. So what we do is just print the grey skills, map that against, so assess the child based on the grey skills, and then that helps you determine, okay, they're showing predominantly level 1 skills, so then they can break it down even more and then run the level 1 assessment. Does that make sense?
I think we might, because the grey just literally refers to the colour in the assessment chart, doesn't it? I think we might need to change that, because the grey area is actually the opposite of that, isn't it? We really want those best fit skills to be able to move further forward, as opposed to not necessarily needing them. Yeah, great. I mean, that's the other thing to say, isn't it? That this assessment as a tool is alongside other things, and it's not designed to be anything more than the best fit position, so we don't hinder people moving forward if they've got the majority of skills in an area.
Yeah.
Great. David wondered, how has the framework been responded to by external stakeholders like local authorities, and has it impacted decisions on placement at the school and possibly even transitioning out of the school?
It's a good question. I personally haven't had experience of it being demonstrated at LAs, although it does feature on our new annual review document. So we are able to say that they've developed X number of skills on the independence framework in which you can refer it. So it's it would be interesting to see that. And we're also, with our Rainbow class, with the class of less support, that was the idea, was to transition some of them out, but we haven't been in that position yet. So we'd like to be. That is the purpose of that class. We would like to be, but yeah, not just yet.
Okay. Russell wondered, do you think that a framework like this could have applications to pupils with autism to maintain placements or better access mainstream settings?
I'd hope so. I'd hope towards the higher levels that it would help schools and settings identify if there is any missing skills. It breaks down independence a little bit further. It would very much be a nice piece of work to know if the skills that we've got on our higher levels of independence framework actually do match with what would be expected within a mainstream setting. So
yeah, absolutely. I'd add one last question actually, just before we move on, before we have to end the session. Is that, did you experience within the school any kind of cultural resistance to move away from the one-to-one model? And then I suppose in the end, like, what impact, or was there any resistance over IEP targets, or what was being focused on in teaching and learning sessions with the introduction of the framework?
Outright resistance, I wouldn't say so. I don't think so. But there is definitely a training shift in terms of the tutors that we employ, and the training that we provide is very much, you need to know this one pupil, and you need to know this one pupil's program. So when they're then given another learner to get to know, they haven't got that flexibility or that mindset. So it's trying to make sure that how they can adapt their learning that day for both learners. So we have rolled out a little bit more in terms of like paired timetables. I know classes, supervisors do try and look to link targets that are very similar. So they both, two pupils may have like peer interaction targets, peer manding, for instance, to make sure they can be run in a paired session and they are linked. It's still, as I said, a work in progress. So it would be good to see, get people's feedback on it. But I don't think there's been much pushback or concern around it.
Good. I just wondered, because sometimes with the mindset, and we've talked about societal constructs a lot, haven't we? And I think they probably exist on a micro and macro level, to speak to I think some of the phraseology that Sheila was using on day one. So I was just curious.
I think we still need to get kind of like parent feedback as well, because obviously we emphasize that we're a one-to-one setting and we pride ourselves on that, but actually we need to have those open conversations as being like, is one-to-one the right for your child, and how do you see their future and stuff? So
which extrapolates out into the right type of support, doesn't it? And often children end up in our services because they haven't had that, and so yeah, it's a whole other debate and conversation. Okay, great. Listen, thank you so much, Bobbie, for your time. Fantastic talk as expected.